China specifically. So we had the chance to see how you were painting, how that process worked for you, how you were working on collage in some of your work, and I loved your story about going around to your family and collecting all of these bits and pieces. So for me in your work, I see this really strong association with collecting, with selecting maybe, of being self-made in a way, and how you're sharing that through your process of making art by picking and choosing the things that you want to include, and how beautifully I think that reflects on who you are as a person and your identity as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually the first time someone's told me that my art is a selection, which is really interesting. But it's always hard for me to answer those types of questions, because whenever I draw, I never have a plan. I never plan it out with a pencil beforehand. It just comes out, and then it's my job later to dissect it, or sometimes I even leave it. It's hard to say exactly where my specific identities come up, because I believe it's somehow intertwined in everything that I create. There's always some subliminal meaning.
Definitely. I think that particularly in your line drawings, but in everything I've seen from you, there's this really tremendous ability to express that spontaneity and that intuition in your work that comes out, and yet things feel so perfect in the way that they're ultimately expressed. And thinking about how your forms are intertwined, and that complexity of figures and of the lines that comes back to that notion of continuity, how you talked about gender being on a continuum, how you referred to the journey of your life, and how we can think, as we talked a little bit earlier, about thinking about things not being so linear, and how all of these figures and everything's interconnected in your work.
Yes.
Is that, I mean, you clearly have that as kind of a worldview in general.
Yeah, for sure. I always say everything is on a continuum or a spectrum, absolutely everything. And I think that it's helped me a lot in life, not just in regards to gender or, you know, my identities, but any choice that I ever make. Knowing that deep down that everything is a spectrum has helped tremendously, because society loves to put things into boxes, loves to categorize things. Once you realize there's things outside of those boxes as well, everything becomes a lot more clear.
Definitely. I think, just on a personal note, and then I'm going to stop talking, but on a personal note, I feel so connected to your work. It feels, and I'm sure this sentiment is shared by many people here tonight, but it feels almost as though you could be talking about me or to me in some ways. That I know we're very different people and we have very different lived experiences, but I feel like you share something that connects to me in terms of feeling like I've been searching or have had moments of self-loathing and confusion. And I think that by sharing that in such a personal way, that really brings us all together in the knowledge that we all experience confusion and self-loathing, to use that word again, at times. And I think the more that we're able to talk about that, and through your work, expressing those sorts of feelings, it makes us all feel a little less alone. So yeah. I'd like to thank you for that.
Of course. I mean, I find whenever anyone exposes themselves and is 100% vulnerable, no matter how different our lives may be, you can connect with them. Because we all feel, like you said, we all feel that vulnerability. It's incredibly powerful.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about representation, right? Just to sort of work off of what Joy just said, like people connect to your work, right, a lot, and with that comes sort of this burden, right, to represent. So I wanted to sort of explore that a little bit through your presentation. At one point you said, be your own representation, right? And then a little later you mentioned, as somebody who's trans, somebody who's disabled, maybe a person of color, if you identify as such, we are not here to be fetishized, right?
Yeah.
So how do you, in your work, sort of balance, this sort of mandate to center your body and your vulnerability and for the purpose of representation, right? But also maintain boundaries or maybe decenter at certain times. How do you make those decisions?
I think that goes hand in hand with tokenization, and I think the most important thing with tokenization is to not just see them as that one label. As I said, we have stories, we have opinions, we have voices, histories of our own. You can't look at someone and degrade them to one term or one label. And to avoid that fetishization and tokenization, you learn more about them. And like, in terms of like the art world or fashion world, like if you were wanting to showcase someone, let's say, who is trans, the way I vet companies, at least when I work with them, is not just, they slap that token on me, but they use the platform, which is bigger than I have, to tell my story, and people are able to see who I am as a trans person, but who I am, and that's how I think you would.
I also really enjoy the fact that you use so many different media, and that sort of allows this sense of fluidity and mobility in who you are, right? Because it's not capturable by simply one frame, right? It's like the way you use vlogging, the way you use film, right? These are like mobile and moving sort of meanings within that, and forms that sort of are very much invested in the present, but also convey a certain changeability, right? Every single day. I find your, I have to say that, well, it's not stalking when you put yourself out there.
Oh my gosh.
No,
That's like, to be transparent, everyone stalks everyone nowadays. Like, when's the last time you haven't looked someone up? Or, it's
I try not to look up my students who identify as anyway, I'm not going to get ageist here, but I try to have some boundaries and some professionalism. But I didn't with you because you're a public figure. Okay, anyway. No, but what I was getting at is I really sort of enjoy and find it so poignant, your live Instagram videos of the T-shirts that you do, right? Which is like sort of this completely silent, it's like a happening in that moment, but it's also every week. There's a repetitiveness in it, and you're able to, us as the audience for that, are able to see you change along with that, right? So it's really beautiful, and thank you for sharing that with us.
I mean, part of why I share that is because before I started tea, I had a horrible fear of needles, like a terrible fear, but like when you realize that you're trans, like that, you want it so bad, like I can't even express. I feel like I need to like dance across the stage to like show how much I want it. But I knew, I was like, I have to get over this fear. And I think part of why I showcase that is because I want people to see, look, I'm doing this every week. It doesn't hurt. I don't flinch. It's fine. I want to try to normalize that. But yeah. I try to do it as much as I can.
So just connected to that, do you feel like you have to be strong?
I have to be what?
Strong.
Strong?
Yeah, strong for
I think,
your audience? Or?
Well, what I realized actually is it's not, like, the pain is so minuscule that it's not, in that moment, I don't have to be strong. If anything, I feel so empowered that I'm able to do this. I'm able to give myself this shot and create myself physically. Like, that's such a huge privilege, and I like savor every single moment. So it's more empowering than like feeling like I have to be strong.
Awesome. Do you want to help up a bit? I have a whole list. It's been submitted to do. I feel like I have a responsibility to represent as well. I could. No disrespect to all the wonderful things you all might have to say, but I have this. No, but I did want to. So I was asking. We were talking with some of the students. So I don't know very much about art. or design, right? But I was onboarded onto this now, super excited because like I told you, a friend of mine in India watches you on Instagram. And so I was like, damn, that's a good photo op if nothing else. Anyway, but I was talking to the students who did, come up with sort of whose brainchild this whole sort of event is and who thought of bringing you. And they were saying something about how they see you as the face of the future of design, right?
Okay.
And I wonder if that sort of...
Wait, they see me as a face?
The face of the future of design. Right?
I mean, that's very nice.
Yes, it is a new pressure.
That's like very nice.
Right? But I wonder if you could say, and I know I'm sort of just pulling this up and these are not your words, right? But what would you say is the future of design, or what should it be? And how do you see yourself in that future?
That's a very good question. But I mean, I always say that I do not like to be the face of anything. Like the reason that I want my story to get out there is not so I will be the face of anything, it's to open the door wider. More than, and to let people who've had similar stories as to mine and more stories that haven't even been shared yet to come up and share their story as well. So I would hope that the future of design and or just the future period will be people who deserve the right to share their story, whether that is, and they haven't yet, whether that is because they've been marginalized or discriminated against. I hope they are the future.
That's awesome. And you have, yes.
So I think that's, as we're talking about the future, maybe a good place to open it up to you all. If anyone has a question for Chella, he's been so gracious in really wanting to make sure that he's talking about what you want to know. So I'd encourage you to ask questions. I think we have a mic up front here.
I have a list too.
Bueno.
So, for me, I just want to say, like, thank you for being so open about being able to be other people's representation in the world, because before I knew about you, I didn't know what it was to be genderqueer, to be non-binary, and I feel so comfortable in that identity now. But, anyways, I'll just ask my question now, I'm sorry.
No, thank you for coming.
Thank you. How can I explain my gender identity to a family who doesn't understand that gender isn't binary? Because I've grown up in a Mexican household, and the terms of like gender neutral terms are relatively new, and so it's really hard to be able to explain to my family like, hey, I don't identify as male or female, but I prefer feminine gender expression with male to gender neutral pronouns.
Yeah, I think that, the generations above us, this is so new to them. And I recommend The Gender Revolution, which is a documentary on National Geographic. And it leads you through as if it's presented as if you know nothing and will lead you through the steps. So I highly recommend that they watch that. But from what you said, as much as it sucks, you do have to continue to use binary terms to explain non-binary to them. But I think you express exactly how I would, and also just telling them that it's different, the way that you, just as I said in my talk, the way you present yourself can be different from how you identify and appear. Most people just link those so closely and permanently, and it's really important that the generations above us realize these are two separate things. And I think, I'm a visual learner, I don't know about that, but
Yes.
like drawing diagrams even. But I would highly recommend the documentary as well.
Okay, am I allowed to ask another question? Okay. So like I said, as a non-binary male who prefers feminine gender expression, how do I find constant as opposed to in general validation within myself when everyone else invalidates my identity?
I think that just ties to being your own representation. Like, share your own story, use whatever platform you have, whether that is just looking in the mirror, seeing yourself, and knowing who you are and knowing that is valid. No one can take that away from you. It's yours. No one can take that away from you.
Also, when you're done, I have 2 deaf jokes that I know that I wanted to share with you. Not like sign language jokes that I know.
I'll be around.
Anybody else?
Hello? Okay, that hurts. So I had a question about, you talked about how your dysphoria is linked to your art a lot, like how, like in that one piece you had the chest drawing that showed like your chest dysphoria and things like that, and I was wondering if you noticed any changes in your art as you've been transitioning on testosterone, like, I guess that's the question. Is
Yeah,
how
I mean,
art has changed with your transition.
I think, for sure, like the way that I draw individuals' chests now mostly look more like my own. And I draw up and down as, in my head, that's like the scars that I'm so incredibly proud to have. But at the same time, I want to continue to draw bodies on the, just all bodies in general, because all bodies deserve representation. But I've definitely, at least for self-portraiture, noticed that change.
Hi, I was just wondering if, how or if at all your Jewish identity affects your work and your life.
I think that being Jewish, you know what it is like, to an extent, to face discrimination. And I think with all my identities, I have faced discrimination, as all of them are in minorities. And I think through, different challenges, facing that, you gain empathy, regardless of what it is. You are exposed to the stereotypes that this world is living off of. And because of that, you are able to learn how to deviate from them. And I think just being Jewish has been part of my doctrines in that way.
You have time for maybe 1 or 2 more. So I have a family member who recently came out as trans. And everyone in my family is super accepting of him, but I sometimes worry that I'm not doing enough to show him that I accept him. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts on that are, as to how I, as a cisgender woman, how I can go about supporting him.
That's a very good question. I can't speak for that person, but I think that going out of your way and either, whether that's telling them in person or sending them a text and asking, I'm here for you, I support you, what can I do? That question isn't asked enough. What can I do? I'm sure they would be overjoyed to know that you were even, going out of your way and consciously thinking about that. I recommend just asking them.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, with the different media that you showed, I was wondering if you could also talk a little bit more about like your clothing design, and if that comes from the same inspiration or if it's different.
Yeah. For clothing design, I almost see every single piece as a weirdly shaped canvas. And I feel like seeing it this way rather than just the piece of clothing that it actually is enables me to play so much more with the composition. And I mean, if a canvas was shaped like that, how would you paint it? Where would you put things? Rather than, oh, it's a jacket. I've seen jackets, they're just, I'm gonna put this here. Like, try to think outside of the box. You'll be very surprised by how differently it shifts your own artwork.
All right, thank you all again, but mostly thanks to Chella. And before we conclude, and he will be here for a few minutes after we wrap up here. If you have any questions you'd like to ask him personally, photo ops. But one thing I would really like for us to do, and I hope this isn't dumb, this might be dumb, is to have all of us come gather at the bottom of the stage with Chella, so I can take a big group portrait of all of you on my phone. Can we do that? Are some of you at least in for that? Can we do that?
Only if you post it on the school's Instagram.
I will post it, and anyone who wants me to do it on their phone, you just give me your phone too. So before we all leave, and before we all come down and do this, seriously, it's going to be really awesome, portrait done here on the front, I would like all of us to give a big hand and a big thanks to Chella. All right, come on down.
All right, I gotta hear your ASL jokes.
So the only two I